Imagine you're walking into a courtroom. It's the most important trial in history, but there are no witnesses taking the stand.
Right.
Instead, the evidence laid out on the tables is, well, it's literally everything that has ever existed. You see a telescope pointing at a distant swirling galaxy. Next to it, a human brain suspended in a jar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and down the line, there's a history book detailing centuries of human morality, suffering, and triumph. The jury has been deliberating for thousands of years, and we still don't have a unanimous verdict. Because the question at the center of this trial isn't about a crime. The question is there a mind behind all of this, or is the universe just a colossal cosmic accident?
We are opening the ultimate cold case files today. And the reason this debate has never been settled is that the evidence on those tables can be interpreted in radically different, highly logical ways. Today, we're mapping out the absolute strongest arguments on all sides of this. For a creator, against a creator, and the nuanced theories in between.
And for you, the listener, we need to make it clear right out of the gate. Our mission on this deep dive is not to bang a gavel and declare a winner.
Definitely not.
We are strictly here to guide you through the terrain of the source material. We want to unpack the friction between these ideas.
Which is crucial because this inquiry goes far beyond, like, a standard religious debate.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally about the nature of reality itself.
Yeah.
It forces us to ask where the physics of the universe came from, whether objective right and wrong genuinely exist.
Right, the big stuff.
Exactly. And where the limits of human reasoning actually lie. I mean, those questions alter how you view your entire existence.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning. To figure out if there is a creator, we have to look at the creation, the physical universe.
Right.
For a long time, the assumption was that the universe just always existed. But the moment you start tracing the chain of events backward, things get complicated. I'm here because of my parents, they're here because of theirs. Tracing back to the first single-celled organisms, back to the formation of Earth. But logic dictates you can't just keep going backward forever.
Yeah, no, you can't. That concept of going backward forever is what philosophers call an infinite regress. And it creates a massive logical paradox. Think about it this way. If you have to cross an infinite number of steps to reach your current destination, you would never actually arrive.
Because there's always one more step back.
Right. But we are here. The current moment is happening. Therefore, the past cannot be infinite. There had to be a starting line.
So someone had to push the first domino.
Yeah. Medieval philosophers arrived at that exact conclusion through pure logic. They argued there must be a first cause or an unmoved mover.
Unmoved mover.
Yeah, something that set the chain of reality into motion without needing to be pushed itself.
Here is my immediate problem with that, though. If the foundational rule is that everything needs a cause, then what caused the creator? You haven't really solved the mystery, you've just kicked the can down the road.
That is the most common pushback, for sure. But it misstates the premise. The classical argument doesn't claim that everything has a cause. It claims that everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Oh.
That distinction is the entire engine of the argument.
I see. Okay.
And this is where modern cosmology actually gave this ancient philosophy some serious teeth. For centuries, skeptics could just say, well, the universe never began, it was just eternal. But the discovery of the Big Bang changed the game.
Because it gave us a starting point.
Exactly. Suddenly, astrophysics confirmed what those ancient philosophers suspected. All of space, time, and matter had a definitive beginning point.
Which means the universe falls under the rule. It began to exist, therefore it needs a cause.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And proponents of this view argue that whatever caused space, time, and matter cannot itself be made of space, time, or matter. It must be spaceless, timeless, and immensely powerful.
Wow.
And when you describe an uncaused, timeless, spaceless, powerful entity that created the universe, well, you're essentially describing the classical definition of God.
But getting the universe to simply exist is only half the battle. The other half is how incredibly specific the universe is. This brings us to the design argument. If you look at the fundamental forces of physics, they aren't just random.
No, not at all. The scientific term is fine-tuning. Cosmologists have mapped out the fundamental constants of the universe, things like the exact strength of gravity or the mass of an electron. And they found that these numbers are calibrated to an almost incomprehensibly precise degree.
Like, how precise are we talking?
If you alter the ratio of electrons to protons by even a fraction of a hair, stars don't form. Planets don't form. Chemistry itself becomes impossible.
So to clarify fine-tuning, imagine walking into a kitchen and finding a perfectly baked, incredibly complex cake.
Yeah.
You don't assume the flour, sugar, and heat just randomly collided by accident, right? You assume a baker, Is that essentially what proponents of fine-tuning are arguing about the laws of physics?
That is the perfect way to visualize it. When physicists look at those cosmic ingredients, they have to ask why it's set that way. And there are really only three options: physical necessity, chance, or design.
Okay.
Necessity means the rules had to be set that way, which most physicists reject because there's no reason gravity couldn't be stronger or weaker. Chance means we just got unbelievably, astronomically lucky.
And the odds of that are so staggering that it feels mathematically absurd.
Right.
Which leaves design. You see the perfectly baked cake, and you logically infer there is a baker.
And what's fascinating here is that neither the argument from causality nor the argument from fine-tuning relies on faith or ancient texts. They use pure logic and the observation of astrophysics to infer a designing intelligence.
But inferring a highly intelligent physicist who engineered the cosmos doesn't really tell us if that being cares about human life. Like, does this cosmic engineer interact with us?
Right.
This is where the source material transitions from the laws of physics to the laws of human behavior.
We are moving from the telescope to the history book, the moral argument.
Right. And the crux of this argument is that across almost all human cultures, there is an undeniable shared sense of absolute right and wrong. We might disagree on the margins, but fundamentally, every healthy human brain agrees that something like torturing an innocent person for fun is wrong. Not just unpopular or, frowned upon by the local government. It feels genuinely, objectively evil.
Yeah, and theists argue that this universal moral sense points directly to a moral lawgiver. Without a transcendent standard, what we call morality is ultimately subjective. It's merely a byproduct of cultural conditioning or random chemical reactions in our brains.
Right.
But we don't treat true evil as just a difference in cultural taste. We treat it as a violation of an objective standard. They argue that an objective moral law requires an objective moral lawgiver.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If everyone agrees that harming an innocent is objectively wrong, couldn't that just be an evolutionary survival mechanism to keep our species alive? Does it definitively have to point to a cosmic rule book?
That is the exact counter-argument presented by naturalists. They argue evolution entirely explains altruism. But philosophers pushing the moral argument draw a very sharp line between a biological instinct and a moral duty.
What's the difference?
An instinct is a description of how things are. A duty is a prescription of how things ought to be. Evolution might explain why we feel a biological urge to protect our own tribe.
Sure.
But evolution is ruthless. If survival is the only goal, then logically pushing a weak or disabled person off a lifeboat to save resources makes perfect evolutionary sense.
Oof. Yet we inherently feel that doing so would be a moral atrocity.
Exactly. Evolution cannot explain why we feel we ought to care for the weak when it actively goes against our survival advantage. Biology gives us the urge, but theists argue it takes a higher authority to give us the objective duty. The law that makes an action universally right or wrong, regardless of survival utility.
That is versus ought gap is a massive philosophical hurdle, and it ties into another highly debated human element, the sheer volume of personal religious experiences.
Oh, this is a fascinating data point. Billions of people across different centuries, continents, and cultures report having profound, transformative lived experiences of a divine presence.
The argument here essentially flips the burden of proof. We generally trust our human senses. If you and I both see a tree in front of us, we assume the tree is there.
Right.
So if billions of people are reporting an encounter with the divine, the skeptic has a massive mountain to climb to prove that billions of independently operating human brains are all suffering from the exact same mass delusion.
It forces us to ask how much weight we give to human testimony. But as compelling as the cosmology and the moral arguments might be, we have to turn to the other side of the courtroom, because the arguments against a creator hit incredibly hard.
They really do. Let's tackle the giant in the room. The problem of evil. If you talk to any philosopher, this is widely considered the absolute strongest counter-argument against the existence of God. It essentially puts the classical definition of God on trial.
It creates a logical trilemma. The traditional concept of God claims three things. God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, and God is all-good.
But then you look at the window at the actual world. You see pediatric cancer. You see tsunamis wiping out entire cities. You see horrific, seemingly pointless suffering. If you're a parent, you instantly pull your child's hand away from a hot stove.
Of course.
Why doesn't a perfectly loving cosmic parent intervene to stop a tsunami or a plague?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the logic of the objection is ruthless. It attacks the very definition. If God wants to stop the tsunami but isn't capable, then God is not all-powerful. If God is capable of stopping it but doesn't want to, then God is not entirely good.
Wow.
Skeptics argue you cannot reconcile an all-powerful, all-loving creator with a world absolutely drenched in unnecessary agony.
So how do proponents of a creator defend against that?
Well, it forces believers to explain why human suffering might be necessary in a divine plan. The defenses usually revolve around free will or character building. The idea is that for humans to have genuine free will, the capacity for profound evil must exist, or that navigating a difficult, painful world is the only way for a soul to develop virtues like courage and deep compassion.
But the skeptic immediately pushes back on the scale of it. Like, maybe some hardship builds character, but does an earthquake that kills thousands of infants build character? For many, the sheer volume of agony makes the greater good defense ring entirely hollow.
And that leads directly to a secondary but equally devastating objection: the problem of divine hiddenness.
This one is so incredibly resonant for modern listeners. The argument essentially asks, if a loving God desperately wants a relationship with human beings, why are we playing cosmic hide and seek?
Philosophers frame this around the concept of non-resistant non-believers. These are people who are genuinely open to the idea of God. They aren't rebelling, they are looking for truth, looking for a sign, and yet they experience absolute silence.
If God has the power to make his existence unambiguously clear, like writing a message in the stars that everyone can see, why leave the evidence so ambiguous? Why build rational creatures who require evidence, withhold that evidence, and then supposedly judge them for not figuring out the riddle?
Skeptics argue that from an observational standpoint, divine hiddenness is indistinguishable from divine absence. And then you add to this the argument of inconsistent revelations. You have thousands of religions across human history, all claiming absolute truth, and they directly contradict each other. One culture's divine text commands pacifism, another's commands holy war.
If the goal is a relationship with humanity, the messaging strategy is disastrously flawed.
Right. And for the skeptics, the most logical explanation for these contradictory, highly culturally specific religions is not that one of them is miraculously true, but that all of them are human constructions.
Which forces a massive pivot in our deep dive. If we agree with the skeptic and remove the creator from the equation, what fills the void? You still have to explain the complexity of the universe and the deeply ingrained religious impulse in human beings.
This is where naturalism steps in, relying entirely on science and psychology. We talked earlier about the fine-tuning of the universe and the sheer complexity of biology. The argument was that a complex design requires a designer. But evolutionary biology offers a different mechanism.
The blind watchmaker concept.
Yes, from Richard Dawkins. Evolutionary theory demonstrates how staggering complexity, like the human eye or the intricate workings of a cell, can arise organically through natural selection and random mutation over billions of years. You don't need an engineer if you have enough time and a mechanism that rewards survival.
The skeptic argues that historically, humanity has always used God as a placeholder for things we didn't understand. We didn't know what caused lightning, so we invented a god who threw thunderbolts. We didn't understand virology, so plagues were divine punishment.
But as the scientific method advanced, those mysteries were solved with natural explanations. The domain of the divine has been constantly shrinking. Naturalists argue it's only a matter of time before we figure out the physics of the Big Bang itself, entirely closing the gap.
But what about the psychological gap? Even if science explains the physical world, why are humans so universally obsessed with the spiritual? If religion is just an invention, why did almost every isolated culture invent it?
Cognitive science provides a brilliant framework for this, centering on a biological mechanism called hyperactive agency detection.
Okay, let's walk through how this works because it's fascinating. Imagine you are an early human walking on the ancient savanna, and you hear a sudden rustling in the tall grass. You have to make a split-second decision. Option A, you assume the rustling is just the wind. Option B, you assume an agent like a hungry lion caused it.
If you assume it's a lion and it's just the wind, you get a little scared, but you live. But if you assume it's just the wind and it is a lion, well, you're removed from the gene pool.
So evolution heavily favored the humans who overassumed that someone or something was out there. We evolved a hyperactive trigger to detect intention and agency even when none exists.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? Are cognitive scientists basically saying that religion is a biological false positive, like a smoke detector that evolved to keep us safe, but now it's going off just because we're making toast?
Yes. That natural survival instinct on the ancient savanna evolved into humanity's complex belief systems today. Our brains are hardwired to look at complex phenomena, thunderstorms, earthquakes, the vastness of the stars, and instinctively assume an agent is behind them. We projected our survival instincts onto the cosmos.
So religion is just the ultimate side effect of trying not to get eaten by lions.
Combined with psychological and social factors, yeah. Thinkers like Sigmund Freud viewed God as a psychological projection, a kind of wish fulfillment of a protective father figure to help us cope with the terrifying reality of our own mortality. Sociologists like Emil Durkheim added that inventing shared sacred rules was the most efficient way to bind large communities together as a social construct.
So we have mapped out the absolute extremes. Strict theism arguing for a purposeful, personal creator, and strict naturalism arguing for a blind, accidental universe driven by physics and biology. But the source material also dives into the incredibly nuanced gray areas between those poles.
Right. This is where some of the most prominent thinkers in history landed. Let's start with agnosticism. This isn't just someone saying, I don't know. It is a formalized philosophical position.
The term was actually coined by Thomas Huxley.
Right. Yeah, and his stance was that the human mind simply does not possess the capacity or the evidence to resolve the question of God's existence. It's simply unknown and possibly unknowable. An agnostic argues that claiming absolute certainty is intellectually dishonest.
Then you have deism. This was massively influential during the Enlightenment.
Held by figures like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin.
Right. When we hear that figures from the 18th century believed in God, we often assume they meant a traditional religious God. But deists viewed the creator as a cosmic clockmaker.
This completely sidesteps the problem of inconsistent revelations and divine hiddenness. Deists argue that a supreme intelligence wound up the universe, set the intricate laws of physics in motion, and then simply walked away. It doesn't intervene or answer prayers.
It's a universe with a creator, but a profoundly lonely one. There's no divine intervention, just the cold, elegant mechanics of nature ticking away.
Moving even further from a traditional creator, you encounter pantheism. This is a concept championed by the philosopher Spinoza. Pantheism essentially states that God and the universe are the exact same thing.
Hold on, so when Albert Einstein famously said he believed in Spinoza's God, he wasn't talking about a personal being in the clouds answering prayers, but rather expressing awe at the mathematical order of the universe itself.
Exactly. Einstein outright rejected the concept of a personal God. When pantheists use the word God, they are expressing a profound, almost spiritual awe at the totality of reality. God is the laws of physics.
Which brings us to perhaps the most disruptive theory in our stack of sources. Agnosticism. Not agnosticism, agnosticism.
With an I. This perspective doesn't just challenge the answers, it challenges the question itself.
The argument here is that the word God isn't even coherently defined enough to have a meaningful debate about. It's like asking two people to furiously debate whether or not a blingle exists. One person says yes, the other says no, but neither of them has established what a blingle actually is.
This raises an important question, right? Because how we define the word God entirely dictates whether we believe God exists or not. If one person defines God as a literal being who dictates moral laws, another defines God as the clockmaker, and a third defines God as the laws of physics themselves, they aren't even participating in the same debate.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from the uncaused cause of the Big Bang to the microscopic fine-tuning of atoms.
From the objective weight of moral duty to the deeply challenging reality of human suffering and evolutionary psychology.
And as we step back and look at the whole picture, it becomes clear why this debate persists. It's not because people are irrational, it's because it asks whether the universe is ultimately personal, with a mind behind it, or impersonal, just an accidental collocation of atoms, as Bertrand Russell put it.
Neither science nor philosophy has definitively closed the case. The evidence on the courtroom tables remains open to interpretation.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own. Imagine you found out with absolute, undeniable certainty today that God did or did not exist. How exactly would that revelation change the way you treat the very next person you interact with? Does the existence of the cosmos change the reality of your character?
That is the ultimate test of all this philosophy.
The trial continues, and you get to weigh the evidence for yourself. Thanks for exploring the source material with us. Keep questioning.